The sovereign monarch has passed, and with his final exhalation, a significant error is rectified. For 72 years, Louis XIV governed the realm with unchallenged dominion, transforming a feudal territory into Europe's preeminent force. Nevertheless, his splendid tenure bequeaths a detrimental inheritance: crippling debts, perpetual conflicts, and a 5-year-old great-grandson poised to ascend a throne that shines with opulence while the nation falters under its burden. Within the opulent confines of Versailles, courtiers murmur about the new leadership, as young Louis XV matures into a ruler more inclined towards pursuits of the chase than the administration of affairs. The aristocracy, subdued by the sun, king's elaborate courtly customs, has lost the capacity to govern their own domains. Instead, they have mastered the art of ceremonial deference, participating in endless festivities, while peasants in remote regions endure crop failures that the gentry never witness. The existing governmental structure stands like a venerable cathedral, awe-inspiring from afar, yet riddled with internal weaknesses that jeopardize its very integrity. Society is segregated into 3 unyielding divisions: the ecclesiastics who engage in prayer, the gentry who engage in combat, and all others who provide the financial sustenance. The first order asserts divine sanction, accumulating extensive landed property that is exempt from taxation. The second order retains its feudal entitlements, acquired by ancestors from the medieval era, collecting dues from cultivators who can scarcely provide for their offspring. The third order, encompassing everyone from prosperous entrepreneurs to impoverished laborers, bears the immense responsibility of upholding a system that affords them no influence over their own governance. In the smoke-filled cafes of Paris, a new intellectual movement emerges, challenging the foundational principles that have governed European society for a millennium. Jean-Jacques Rousseau pens groundbreaking ideas destined to inspire minds across the continent. Man is born free, yet everywhere he is in chains, he declares. His treatise, The Social Contract, becomes forbidden literature, secretly exchanged among eager readers hungry for justifications of their mounting discontent. Voltaire's incisive wit surgically dissects religious hypocrisy and royal pretension with remarkable precision. Exiled to England, he observes a society where merchants attain prominence, and Parliament curtails the monarch's authority. His correspondence regarding England offers his countrymen compelling insights into a world where lineage holds less sway than competence, and where commerce thrives independently of aristocratic intervention. Montesquieu's The Spirit of the Laws provides a framework for administrative adjustments that will eventually inspire both American revolutionaries and French constitutionalists. His doctrine of divided authority challenges the very essence of absolute monarchy, proposing that liberty necessitates built-in constraints on power rather than reliance on the sagacity of rulers. Across the Atlantic, John Locke's concepts of inherent rights and governmental accord permeate French intellectual circles through clandestine book shipments and secret translations. His revolutionary assertion that governmental legitimacy stems solely from the assent of the populace contradicts everything the Bourbon dynasty represents. These Enlightenment philosophies disseminate throughout the kingdom like seeds on fertile soil, finding purchase in minds already receptive due to their daily encounters with inequity and injustice. In bustling marketplaces and busy workshops, ordinary individuals begin to question why birth circumstances should dictate lifelong opportunities. Why should a nobleman's unproductive son inherit vast estates? Why should a merchant's astute daughter remain perpetually excluded from public participation? The 7 Years' War erupts, depleting the royal treasury at a rate exceeding the absorption of moisture by parched earth during summer. The ministers of Louis XV procure substantial loans to fund global military campaigns against British expansion, pledging the nation's future to satisfy contemporary ambitions. When peace is finally brokered, the kingdom faces insolvency, with Britain emerging victorious, having secured territories in both North America and India. Military defeat wounds national pride, but financial collapse imperils existence itself. The crown's indebtedness escalates exponentially, with interest payments consuming an ever larger proportion of governmental revenue. Finance ministers change with the regularity of seasonal attire, each proclaiming miraculous remedies only to discover that arithmetic remains stubbornly resistant to hopeful expectations. Jacques Necker arrives as the Director General, bringing Swiss financial acumen to the fiscal disorder. His groundbreaking Compte Rendu publicly discloses government finances for the inaugural time in history, revealing the astonishing reality of expenditures to a populace that had never before glimpsed such classified information. Citizens discovered that their tax contributions subsidized not only essential services, but also substantial retirement annuities for favored courtiers, ambitious construction projects, and overseas ventures that primarily benefit the nobility. The document circulates throughout the land with alarming speed, copied and disseminated until even farmers in distant provinces comprehend how their sacrifices support aristocratic extravagance. Necker's revelations dismantle the aura of mystery surrounding official finances, transforming abstract grievances into concrete awareness of governmental waste and malfeasance. Concurrently, across the ocean, American colonists rebel against British taxation without representation. Cognizant observers watch with keen interest as farmers and merchants in the New World translate theoretical principles into revolutionary action. The American Declaration of Independence echoes sentiments that Rousseau and Voltaire might have articulated, asserting that governmental authority is justly derived from the consent of the governed. Louis XVI, young and well-intentioned but cripplingly indecisive, opts to endorse American independence, partly due to anti-British sentiment and partly from misguided optimism that victory would restore national prestige. His financial advisors caution that intervention will bankrupt the kingdom, but the monarch prioritizes glory over fiscal prudence. Wealth flows across the Atlantic to equip Washington's troops while taxpayers struggle to fulfill their own obligations. The affair of the diamond necklace erupts, irrevocably damaging the monarchy's reputation among the populace. Cardinal de Rohan, believing he could gain Queen Marie Antoinette's favor, sanctions the acquisition of an exceptionally costly diamond necklace purportedly intended for the Queen. The intricate deception, masterminded by Countess de la Motte, exposes the corruption endemic to the court, making Marie Antoinette appear culpable of extravagance during a period of national financial hardship. Popular pamphlets disseminate malicious rumors about the Austrian-born queen, portraying her as a foreign agent influencing her ineffectual husband and squandering national resources on frivolous diversions. Marie Antoinette becomes a reviled symbol of aristocratic excess, blamed for every governmental misstep and extravagant expenditure, regardless of her actual culpability. An agricultural crisis intensifies the kingdom's suffering, as crop failures render bread prices inaccessible to ordinary households. In Parisian markets, bakeries transform into arenas of desperation, where famished patrons contend for loaves that cost more than a day's wages. Provincial towns witness food disturbances as desperate throngs assail grain convoys destined for affluent districts, their own children crying from hunger. The parlements, regional judicial bodies dominated by noble magistrates, seize this juncture to assert their ancestral prerogatives against governmental authority. They refuse to ratify new tax levies, citing constitutional rights to review decrees prior to implementation. Their resistance appears principled, safeguarding traditional liberties against arbitrary power. However, detractors recognize that the parliamentarians are primarily safeguarding their own tax exemptions rather than the welfare of the common people. And Robert-Jacques Turgot, appointed Director General, attempts profound economic reforms that jeopardize established interests throughout the realm. His proposals to dismantle guild monopolies, remove internal trade impediments, and subject privilege orders to taxation promise logical remedies to national dilemmas. Yet, logical reasoning proves insufficient against aristocratic opposition, determined to preserve lucrative traditions. Turgot's dismissal exemplifies the insurmountable predicament confronting ministers committed to reform. Meaningful transformation necessitates confronting powerful factions, possessing enough influence to ruin the careers of reformers. The nobility and senior clergy unite to protect their privileges, ensuring the intensification of the fiscal crisis, as resolutions remain politically unachievable. Jacques Necker returns to leadership, but his second tenure confronts even more dire circumstances than his initial one. Governmental expenditures persistently outstrip revenues despite various expedients and temporary measures. The American conflict, initially anticipated to be brief, endures for years, consuming treasury reserves that the nation can no longer afford to deplete. The Assembly of Notables convenes, summoned by Charles Alexandre de Calonne, to approve fiscal adjustments that prior ministers failed to enact. This assembly of high-ranking nobles, clergy, and magistrates represents the kingdom's most privileged strata, precisely the groups that must relinquish advantages for reform to succeed. Their predictable refusal to accept increased taxation confirms that the existing regime is incapable of self-reform. Calonne's presentation unveils the true fiscal predicament: annual deficits surpassing 100 million livres, total indebtedness approaching 4 billion livres, and interest payments consuming nearly half of all governmental income. The assembled notables express astonishment at figures that informed observers have long suspected, yet they reject proposed solutions that would necessitate significant sacrifices from the privileged orders. Étienne Charles de Loménie de Brienne replaces Calonne, inheriting an insurmountable task: implementing reforms that the Assembly of Notables has already rejected. His attempts to circumvent noble opposition through direct registration of decrees in the Parlement precipitate a constitutional crisis that paralyzes the government while financial collapse accelerates. The Parlements respond by demanding the convocation of the Estates General, the ancient representative assembly that has not convened since the early 17th century. Their appeal resonates throughout the kingdom as various factions discover shared interests in limiting authority, albeit for disparate reasons. Nobles seek to preserve privileges threatened by reform. Commoners anticipate representation that might address their grievances. Provincial assemblies begin convening to elect representatives and draft the Cahiers de Doléances, lists of grievances that will guide delegates in the forthcoming Estates General. These local gatherings serve as training grounds for political engagement, instructing ordinary citizens in articulating complaints, proposing solutions, and selecting leaders from their own communities. In innumerable village assemblies, peasants compile detailed inventories of feudal obligations that impoverish rural populations. Manorial dues, ecclesiastical tithes, taxes, corvée labor requirements, and hunting restrictions that safeguard aristocratic game while crops face destruction. Urban guilds protest regulations that hinder economic innovation and shield established masters from younger competitors. The bourgeoisie, comprising educated professionals, successful merchants, and minor officials, emerges as the most articulate proponents of the Third Estate. Lawyers, physicians, and businessmen possess both grievances against aristocratic privilege and the rhetorical acumen to articulate popular frustrations compellingly. They comprehend Enlightenment political theory and personally experience the constraints imposed by birth-based hierarchies. Parish priests, despite their official affiliation with the First Estate, often sympathize more with their parishioners than with affluent bishops who reside in opulence akin to secular princes. These lower clergy members witness poverty and hardship that their ecclesiastical superiors rarely encounter, fostering internal tensions within the church that are poised to erupt into open conflict. As winter recedes and spring approaches, the nation stands on the precipice of upheaval. The monarch has pledged to convene the Estates General in May, raising expectations across the land, yet offering no clear remedies for the crises necessitating such drastic measures. Financial collapse appears imminent. Social tensions reach critical levels, and political institutions prove inadequate to manage the transformations demanded by the circumstances. In workshops and marketplaces, along rural roads and urban thoroughfares, ordinary people sense that momentous changes are approaching. They cannot foresee the ensuing turmoil and bloodshed, the wars and terror that will engulf their children's lives, nor the profound transformation that will reshape not only their homeland, but the entire world. They are aware only that the established order is disintegrating, and something novel must emerge from its ruins. The Ancien Regime has sown the seeds of its own demise through decades of fiscal irresponsibility, social disparity, and political inflexibility. Now, those seeds are poised to germinate in the revolutionary spring of 1789, when the Estates General will convene at Versailles, unleashing forces beyond anyone's control. The fuse has been ignited. The detonation awaits. Spring arrives at Versailles with an unusual sense of anticipation as the grandest palace in Europe prepares for an event not witnessed within living memory. Carpenters assemble benches in the Salle des Menus Plaisirs, creating seating for 1,200 delegates who will represent 25 million subjects in the first gathering of the Estates General since the reign of Louis XIII. The sounds reverberate through corridors where courtiers whisper about the unprecedented assembly that promises to redefine the kingdom's future. Abbé Emmanuel Joseph Sieyès publishes a pamphlet that spreads across the realm with the speed of lightning through a summer sky. What is the Third Estate? It boldly asks, crystallizing months of escalating resentment into revolutionary clarity. His answer resonates in every bourgeois salon and artisan workshop. Everything. What has it been hitherto in the political order? Nothing. What does it desire to become? Something. These pronouncements transform abstract grievances into concrete political demands. The Third Estate constitutes 98% of the population, performs all productive labor, generates all wealth, yet possesses no meaningful voice in governance. CAS demonstrates with devastating logical precision that the nation and the Third Estate are essentially one and the same, rendering aristocratic privilege not merely unfair, but absurd. The pamphlet's dissemination highlights the power of the printed word to shape public sentiment in ways previously unimaginable. Affordable printing presses replicate ideas faster than authorities can suppress them, fostering an underground network of political communication operating beyond conventional control mechanisms. Coffee houses become crucibles of democratic thought, where shopkeepers debate constitutional theory with the sophistication of university professors. Elections for the Estates General transform quiescent provincial towns into centers of political awakening. Guilds, previously preoccupied solely with trade regulations, suddenly find their members discussing natural rights and popular sovereignty. Village assemblies, typically focused on local disputes, begin drafting manifestos that challenge the fundamental tenets of monarchical government. The electoral process itself becomes a form of revolutionary education. For the first time in history, ordinary citizens participate in selecting representatives who will articulate their interests at the highest governmental levels. Peasants discover they can vote for delegates who comprehend their struggles. Urban workers realize their voices carry weight in choosing spokesmen who share their daily experiences. Cahiers de doléances are compiled from every corner of the kingdom, creating an unprecedented compendium of popular grievances and proposed reforms. These documents revealed the breadth of dissatisfaction with existing arrangements. Rural communities demand the abolition of manorial privileges. Urban corporations seek the elimination of internal trade barriers, and professional groups call for careers open to talent rather than birth. The Cahiers also demonstrate remarkable consensus across geographical and social divides. Whether drafted in Norman villages or Provençal towns, in artisan workshops or bourgeois salons, the complaints echo similar themes: taxation without representation, legal inequality, economic constraints, and social injustice. The kingdom speaks with a unified voice in condemning the system that has governed it for centuries. May arrives with ceremony befitting the momentous occasion. The delegates process through the hall adorned in medieval attire that accentuates the hierarchical distinctions the Third Estate increasingly questions. Nobles are clad in silk and feathers, the clergy in religious vestments, but the Third Estate appears in plain black cloth, deliberately emphasizing their exclusion from aristocratic splendor. Yet, appearances can be deceiving. Among those black-clad deputies march some of the kingdom's most brilliant minds: lawyers versed in constitutional theory, doctors who apply scientific reasoning to societal issues, merchants who grasp economic principles, and writers who wield the power of language to sway hearts and minds. They may lack aristocratic titles, but they possess something potentially more potent: ideas capable of reshaping the world. The opening ceremonies reveal the underlying tensions destined to erupt into open conflict. Louis XVI delivers an address that acknowledges the fiscal crisis but offers no vision for fundamental reform. He speaks as a benevolent sovereign, seeking his subjects' assistance rather than as a constitutional leader accountable to popular will. His words reflect the mindset of a man who still believes in his divine right to rule, even as he solicits aid from those he considers his inferiors. Jacques Necker follows with a detailed fiscal presentation that confirms what informed observers already suspect. The kingdom teeters on the brink of bankruptcy. His statistics provide concrete evidence for abstract complaints, demonstrating that fiscal mismanagement has precipitated a crisis threatening national survival. Yet, even Necker's proposed remedies remain constrained by traditional assumptions about monarchical authority. The Third Estate arrives at Versailles with clear directives from their constituents. Vote by head rather than by order, thereby ensuring that numerical superiority translates into political power. This seemingly technical procedural matter ultimately determines whether the Estates General will preserve aristocratic privilege or establish genuine popular representation. Everything hinges on how the votes are tallied. The nobility and clergy, recognizing the threat to their dominant position, insist on separate deliberations by estate, where their combined opposition can block any reforms that jeopardize traditional privileges. They understand that voting by head would permit the Third Estate, bolstered by sympathetic nobles and clergy, to outvote conservative resistance. The constitutional impasse appears immediate and absolute. Days pass in futile attempts to resolve the procedural dispute through negotiation. The Third Estate refuses to verify credentials or commence substantive business until voting procedures are settled. The privilege orders maintain their insistence on separate deliberations. Government officials attempt mediation, but offer no solutions that address the fundamental conflict between democratic and aristocratic principles. Frustration mounts among the Third Estate deputies, who have traveled hundreds of miles to represent their constituents' interests, only to find themselves thwarted by procedural maneuvers designed to preserve the inequalities they aim to reform. They perceive this juncture as their singular chance to enact substantial change, rendering any form of compromise akin to betraying the faith placed in them. The stalemate is broken when the commoners take a revolutionary stance, fundamentally altering the Assembly's character. On the 17th of June, prompted by the suggestion of Abbé Sieyès, they proclaim themselves the National Assembly of France, asserting sole authority to voice the popular will. This audacious move transforms a relic of the past into a modern representative body, implicitly invalidating the standing of the privileged classes. The declaration echoes through Versailles like a harbinger of an impending tempest. The nobility and clergy grasp immediately that, acknowledging this claim, would relegate them to the status of ordinary individuals, whose views would hold no particular sway in national discourse. The Third Estate has not merely challenged specific policies, but has repudiated the entire societal framework that has governed the realm for a millennium. 3 days later, the newly constituted National Assembly arrives at their customary assembly hall, only to find the doors barred and guarded by military personnel. Government officials cite preparations for a ceremony as the reason, but the delegates recognize it as a transparent maneuver to force their compliance. The administration anticipates that denying them a meeting space will compel them to relinquish their revolutionary aspirations. Instead, they proceed to a nearby tennis court, where they take an oath that marks the inception of constitutional governance in the nation. Under the leadership of astronomer Jean-Sylvain Bailly, who assumes the presidency, they pledge not to disband until they have furnished the country with a constitution ensuring popular liberties and curtailing governmental authority. The tennis court oath elevates a group of legal representatives into revolutionary lawmakers, vested with the power to reshape the fundamental laws of the land. They are no longer merely submitting petitions for reforms, but are asserting their right to establish new structures grounded in popular sovereignty, superseding inherited privilege. The constitutional revolution has commenced. The government's reaction oscillates between yielding and resisting, mirroring Louis XVI's indecisive nature and the conflicting counsel he receives from his ministers, courtier associates, and family. Some advisors advocate for the immediate suppression of the assembly before their assertions permeate the kingdom. Others propose conciliation, suggesting that revolutionary ardor might be channeled into moderate reforms. The monarch attempts a compromise by convening a session where he intends to announce concessions aimed at appeasing popular demands without relinquishing core royal prerogatives. His proposed reforms include regular convocations of the Estates General, limitations on taxation without consent, and the dismantling of certain feudal privileges. However, he insists on maintaining the practice of separate deliberation by order and preserving essential sovereign powers. The session proves to be a spectacular failure when the Third Estate refuses to disperse after the king's directive for them to reconvene by their traditional estates. When the Master of Ceremonies reiterates the order, Honoré Gabriel Riquetti, Comte de Mirabeau, a nobleman who has aligned himself with the Third Estate, delivers a response that encapsulates the spirit of revolutionary resolve. "We are here by the will of the people," he declares, "and we shall not leave except by the force of bayonets." These words electrify the delegates, who recognize they have crossed the threshold from legal opposition to outright revolutionary defiance. They are no longer subjects appealing to their sovereign, but representatives of a sovereign populace, claiming ultimate authority over the government. The confrontation at Versailles has become a trial of wills between competing notions of political legitimacy. Concurrently, economic turmoil and political instability foster volatile conditions in Paris, with escalating unemployment due to business failures and soaring food prices placing them beyond the reach of ordinary families. Artisans, whose primary concerns were typically guild regulations, now find themselves unable to provide for their children. Day laborers discovered that their wages are insufficient to cover basic necessities. The capital transforms into a tinderbox awaiting a spark. News from Versailles reaches the Parisian populace, already inflamed by hunger and economic despair. The political upheaval unfolding in the Assembly resonates deeply with individuals experiencing firsthand the inadequacies of the existing system. They begin to perceive their personal hardships as part of a larger crisis necessitating fundamental change, rather than minor adjustments. Public speakers emerge in marketplaces and public squares, elucidating constitutional developments in language accessible to the common citizens. They bridge abstract political principles with tangible grievances, illustrating how aristocratic privilege contributes to the suffering of the masses. The revolution disseminates from legislative debates into the collective consciousness. Camille Desmoulins emerges as one of the most persuasive orators, leveraging his legal background and journalistic acumen to translate intricate political theories into compelling calls to action. His pamphlets circulate widely in working-class neighborhoods, where improved literacy rates have fostered a substantial readership for political discourse. Ideas previously confined to elite circles now reach artisan workshops and laborers' taverns. The situation intensifies in volatility when Louis XVI dismisses Jacques Necker, the finance minister who had become a champion of reform among the common people. News of his dismissal spreads through Paris like wildfire, leading many to believe that the king has definitively sided with aristocratic opposition against popular interests. The dismissal appears to validate fears that compromise remains unattainable. Crowds gather in the Palais Royal, an area established by the Duke of Orléans as a semi-autonomous zone conducive to political discourse free from royal oversight. Speakers condemn the dismissal as proof of a conspiracy to suppress the Third Estate and reinstate absolute monarchy. The atmosphere shifts from protest to insurrection, with speakers advocating for resistance against tyrannical authority. Sunday, the 12th of July, witnesses the initial significant confrontations between civilians and the military. As crowds endeavor to impede the movement of troops